This is something that I call a mixtape story. It's essentially a short adventure that I had been on. It was something that started my love for the paranormal, for ghosts and demons of the world. And these are the tellings of my mom and other stories that I have heard throughout my life. I go through my family's background as well as other urban legends, and, well, any kind of paranormal story that comes to memory. My grandmother was born in a little cabin on the outskirts of Columbia. She was born when electricity was not a normal, and by the time that she was old enough to see electricity, she was in her home and she was already with a couple of kids. My grandmother is older than the school that my mom and her brother went to, so I took that into account. My mom grew up in a small town of western side of Columbia. She lived a stone's throw away from the airport. I remember as a kid watching planes take off and land. Heck, I even remember shadows of the planes as they flew over our house, and the low roar of the engines from the massive silver bird in the sky. Through the years, I grew up of hearing of an old Indian graveyard, different ones around the area, but they're all pretty much still the same. I remember hearing friends talk about an old Indian feather stuck in the ground, and no one could pull it out of the sandy ground by the creek near the old gas station that I would pass going into town. I never saw a feather on my treks in that area, but I figured I didn't know exactly where it was either. After all, I was a dumb kid that apparently knew everything under the sun. Unlikely. But I knew that I was into any ghost story that I could get my hands on. The date was about mid-April of 1984. I remember because the dogwoods were in full bloom, and that baseball was something that had just gotten into full swing in my neighborhood. So I remember back on this tale that Mom told me about her middle school's principal. He had apparently found out that his wife was cheating, and from the stories, he had walked the halls of the school before taking his own life. He had been missing for days. They finally found 2 chairs set up were the place of his demise. The local police had no clue why this was, but from what I heard, it was a hush-hush kind of case. Being in the South, a lot of ghost talk was not really allowed. It was considered demonic and that the church would handle it. But she was closed-mouthed about it all, like getting blood from a stone. Geez, this lady just teased a story and wouldn't give out any information that she didn't think that I was interested in. She would just go back to something else on her mind. I knew that it was a dead end as I thought back on the situation that happened a few or more years ago. The next morning after I got into town, I hit up my cousin. It was a Saturday and chances were that he was going to watch some sports on TV. So I called him up and yep, he was just hanging out and playing some video games until the game came on. He said over the phone he was about to throw a burger or 2 on the grill and wondered if I wanted one. Heck yeah, I'll take a burger, I said. If you cook anything like you, it'll be right on. Come on over, he said. It won't take long to get these going. As I hung up the phone, I told Mom where I was headed because I'm only like 14, so I have to tell her everything. She said okay, and phoned her brother just to make sure that he knew I was coming over. I finally got the all clear, and I was out the door before she was even off the phone. I ran to the shed and slid the metal doors open, and sitting right there as I opened the beige doors, a 10-speed that has always done me right. I backed it out of the shed and closed the doors, and hit the open trail. My cousin was only a few miles down the road. I pedaled with a purpose and had the wind blowing through my hair, and I was just enjoying the thrill of the ride. I would ride down the dirt roads and would do a couple of ramp jumps onto the dirt road. You know how us kids back in the day were, wild and bushy-tailed. As I skirted off the main drag onto my cousin's street, I coasted down to the house. As I rolled up to the porch, I laid it on the side and stepped off the pedal onto the porch. The door was open and my Uncle Hugh greeted me. Well, Bo, that was fast, he said. Yeah, well, Mikey's making burgers. My uncle laughed and we walked inside. I went right to the fridge and grabbed a cold one and a frosted mug from the freezer. So I told my cousin I was thinking about going to the old school and to see if it was haunted or not. He looks at me with excitement. Really? Yeah, dude, I say. I think we can sneak out and see what's up with it. We made plans to see some exciting things. We have our walkies ready because, man, these things are gold if you're going to go out with a friend and split up. The sky is still pretty lit at 8 p.m., and we decided we were going to head out about 1 in the morning. And our parents will be sleeping, so that will be the best time. With pins and needles, we both wait. We can't talk on our walkies because it doesn't go about a mile or so. But we have our good old trusted CB radios, modded of course.
Breaker 1-3, Breaker 1-3.
I say on the mic of the CB.
Beat Nick 57, the rain is right, over.
I hear in response.
G. Krebs is ready to play the bongos, I say. Toss it on side B, man, and play it to the last track. That one says we carry.
My cousin says over the headphones that I have on, this is code for meet me at the quick carry in an hour. We didn't want to seem suspicious, plus no one could figure this out. I mean, who talks like that? As the minutes dragged by like hours and pretended to be asleep, I had my main radio set to the public radio station, especially at 11 o'clock or so. They have a show called Echo. What a segment of music. Nothing like what is played over the normal radio waves. As I wait and keep my CB radio on, I also have a headset under my pillow so that I could hear if good old Mikey got on. I feel like I'm starting to drift off when I hear words. Oh yeah, it's Mikey.
Beat Nick 57 on the rise, over.
I hear over the small speaker that I put over my ears. I grab my mic and say,
This is Snowman, can I get a confirm, over?
I hear a sarcastic response.
Don't make me, won't you?
I laugh to myself and say, over.
Over the mountains of the moon, through the valley of the shadow.
His response is,
Let's ride.
I kept my CB on just in case I needed someone at home in an emergency. I also had a handheld CB just in case real emergencies. Because Dad always taught me to be prepared. I grab my backpack and set my bed to look like I'm sleeping. I open my window and crawl out. As I make my way down the road, I keep an eye and ear out for any cars coming. I try to stay as hidden as I could. I finally get to the place where we meet. My blood is pumping and I can hardly hear the sounds around me. I don't sneak out, but this seemed like it would be a great time. We head out and it doesn't seem to take us long. Before you know it, we made it to the school. We stashed our bikes behind the shrubs near the door we were going into. The school has been abandoned for a few years now, and it wasn't hard to get in. The only thing that we had to do was keep an eye out for any bums and hobos in the area. We snake our way through the quiet halls, and it seems like there were eyes all around us, but we didn't see anything. We use our military-grade flashlights, you know, the ones with the red lens so you can see better at night and not have a beacon or two wandering around. The sounds we hear around us are subtle, but sounds as if we are surrounded. We press forward. Neither one of us are really sure where the basement entrance is from here, but we have some time to explore. We make it down to the graffitied walls and see desks thrown about everywhere. It felt much creepier than it should. The air started to feel heavy. It could have been our nerves that brought this feeling on, but we were kids, so cut us some slack. As we walked slower down the abandoned halls, we saw shadows in our peripherals. And what happened next freaked us out both. Our flashlights went out. We both stood still and we could hardly take a breath, or even moved a muscle. We listened to our surroundings. Silence. We could hear the steady drip of water coming from somewhere in the building. The drip seemed to come from the right of us. We turned around and looked into the darkness. We saw nothing. Not even the shadows. It seemed our vision has narrowed. As we turned back around and started heading forward instead of retreating, as we pass each and every room, we see shadows darting back and forth. We are scared as we move on. By the time we get about 50 feet ahead, our flashlights turn on. Weird, Mike whispers. I nodded. We stared at each other for a moment. You ready to keep going, I say in a hushed tone. I guess, Mikey says. I decided I would lead the way on this ghost hunt. I was going to go down the halls as fast as I could, looking around for the basement. And to the left, it looks as if there might be a stairwell. I wondered if that would lead us to our destination. I decided to run down the last 30 feet or so of the stairwell, and that I had left Mikey in the dust. Yes, the stairs to the basement. I take a deep sigh and look at Mikey. He looks back at me as quiet as a mouse. No guts, no glory, I say as I head down the dark and lowering stairs. Finally get to the basement. We kinda came in as a couple of cowardly soldiers, and we dressed like them. We looked like a couple of idiot survivalists that didn't know our hair from a hole in the ground. But We move forward only a little. We see that the bottom of the stairs is different than what we had thought. You know, a wide open basement. No, we see a hallway, or a tunnel rather. There isn't any light. We move toward the end of the hallway so we can see what's on the other side. Yeah, we are definitely the chickens in this story. The halls are normal concrete walls and ceiling, and yes, the floor as well. It seems to be constructed before there was a school here, as we saw as we made it to the end of the tunnel. The open floor space was immense. It was about half the size of the school. We creeped forward a few feet and brought in the scopes of the red flashlights. I Spanish archer Mikey on the arm. I start to unscrew the red lens to my flash. I place the crimson lens in my pocket, and Mikey does the same. The room brightens a bit, though, and we are able to make out the walls around. A big empty room that has rooms and hallways on the outskirts of the main room. Let's go to the right and skirt the wall, and go from room to room, Mikey whispers. We do just that, and at a snail's pace, I might add. The walls weren't covered in dust like I thought they would have been. I guess no one around to create dust, I thought to myself. We get to the first floor. We put our ears to the door and we hear footsteps inside. Our heartbeat stops, only for a moment, and we hear what sounds like writing on a blackboard. Mikey and I look at each other. I motion to move forward, but before I do, I grab Mikey's arm and take my flash and move it along the walls to the open room and stop at each hallway for a moment to see if there was anything or any kind of movement. Nothing. We move forward quickly and quietly. When we get to each door, we hear whispering and movement from inside of each of the rooms. We finally get ourselves to the first of the hallways. We slowly look down the hallway. Nothing. It seems to go on for a fair piece, about 30 feet or so. I take the lead again and take a brisk walk down the silver concrete tomb. Well, it seems like a tomb to me right about now. My flashlight seems to have a brick wall in front of it, as it seems to be the end of the corridor. I lower my light and bring it up again so my eyes can adjust to the new surroundings in front of us. It was just a solitary room, and what appeared to have a big desk and chair, and I think a candle and quill. I looked upon with interest. We hadn't thought this was going to be something that we would ever see in the basement of an old school that our parents went to as a kid. We walked to the left, and we used our warm beams of light that went around the room. What happened next was a heck of a surprise if there ever was one. A cobweb-covered candle lamp on the desk flickered on. We were both shocked with fright. Neither one of us moved, not even to turn off our flashlights that were pointed straight to the ground because our arms just dropped with amazement. I took a deep breath as the candle flickered in front of me. To the right of us, there were figures walking through the hallway up to the desk. The figure in front went to the other side of the desk and stood. They are all wearing hooded shrouds. The figure in the front, wearing a darker shroud than the rest, raised his arms. The group started chanting in some incoherent language. It was like something I could understand but not understand at the same time. As the chanting grew louder in our ears, it finally came to a halt. And I even looked at Mikey, and he was slack-jawed and looking forward in wonder. It seemed as if some kind of ritual or something was like that was happening. From the opening of the hallway, another figure walked into the dimly lit room. The crowd of chanters cleared the path for the solitary being that walks up as if he were the head of God himself. He started chanting aloud as the others bowed their heads. Man, we gotta get out of here. I ain't doing this again, I thought to myself. Ha, unlikely kid. The chanting from this guy got a lot louder and louder, and the walls were shaking all around us. The main figure raises his arms high and seems to extend his arms longer than they should allow. He stops quickly and looks at us, like we were two deer caught in a headlight. We were more screwed than one would be in court. He looks back into nothing as if he never saw us. He turns around and picks up an object from the desk. It looks like a book. He opens the book and starts to read from it. As he reads from the book, it seems to get louder, and the hoodies around him start to hum. As we stare on with dread, and with a lump of the baseball size in our throats, we continue to look. The man reading from the book lowers it and brings one of his hands forward. We look to our right. We see a figure walking forward in a gray cloak. As the figure comes to the man in the cloak, it takes off its hood. It's a woman, about middle-aged from what I can see of her silver hair. She bows in front of the being in front of her. he lifts his arms above her. He slowly turns around and places the book on the table and picks up another object. Holy crap, I say to myself. It's a freaking knife. The dark-clothed being turns around and brings the knife above his head and chants some more. The woman figure that was knelt in front of him turns around and stands tall. The tall, dark, luminous figure shrouds over the woman's smaller stature and takes the knife and grazes it over her chest and neck. As the moans from the group turn into chants, the woman starts to speak or pray. I'm not sure which one, but there she was, just a clattering away with the figure behind her that brings the blade to her open throat and slides it across, bringing a smooth red liquid from her neck. As the cuts went deeper, her chanting and talking turned into gurgling gasps. As the growing figure behind her drug the blade deeper and deeper, the woman rasped out in angst and wails. The wails turned into a gagging peace. As the lifeless body of the woman dropped to the ground, the chanters began to close in on the woman's lifeless body. Darkness engulfed the room as the cloaked chanters circled around. It was hard to see what was happening next. We could only see the gathering. It seemed to go on for minutes. The main figure seems to be floating above the rest as the chants become whispers. There was a dark blue bellow of fog or smoke coming from the center of the group. As the figure above them used its arms to do a circular motion over the group and chanting to the followers. The candle went out. All of a sudden, a silence and a blast of cold air, or rather wind, blew through the entire room. The blue smoke was swirling everywhere. Even though it was total darkness, the mist of the fog had a blue phosphorus luminescence. And the chanting that was what seemed like whispers turned into louder chanting and chattering amongst the group. It seemed as if each person was lifting up a prayer to the Savior that might show them itself. As we looked upon with fear and intrigue, we saw the figures of the group started to take a few steps back and leaving the center where the fallen woman was. They kneeled as they were now chanting together. Their screams and words seemed to have gotten more violent, and the group started a maniacal laugh. A flicker from behind the group started small, and then ignited if it were a lantern that pierced all of the crevices of the darkness that surrounded it. My eyes adapted to the darkness. I was able to see that the woman in the center was being raised above the kneeling. The figure of the woman rose about 5 feet or so off the floor, and was just floating there. The group started yelling the same words over and over and over. The dead woman in the center started to glow with a slight bronze glow, and the chanters all around started laughing and howling with excitement. Mikey and I both knew that it was time to run like hell. And all of a sudden, the chanting in the room stops. The entire group slowly turns around and stares at the two of us just standing there like lambs to a slaughter. I didn't wait for anything to tell me to get. I just bolted and I was hoping that Mikey was behind me. I was running through the long hallway like there was no tomorrow. And if these beings or people or creatures grabbed me, then there would be no tomorrow. I tripped over a desk that was in the middle of the room, and I fell over with a heck of a clatter. Mikey ran to me and grabbed me up as fast as he could and yelled, "Run!" We bolted again, and as I was running, I was frantically looking for my flash to turn it on and lead me out of this hellhole. I was running away down the hall to the open rooms and finally to the stairs. I started to run up the stairs or something grabs my ankle. I'm running away down the hall to the open room and finally to the stairs. As I start to run to the stairs, something grabs my ankle and yanks me down a step or 3. As I yelled in complete fright, I kicked with my free foot and landed a couple of blows that hit whatever was holding my ankle. As I grabbed onto the rail of the stairs and began to pull myself up with all my might, I finally get free and start scrambling and fighting everything in my path like a madman. I finally get to the top of the stair and I can see Mikey's figure as his flashlight bobbles with his movement through the dark hallways of the main corridor. The sounds of people are all around, and all I hear is chanting that seems to fill my ears. As I get to the last of the corridors and run down the main drag of the school, I see the open door that we entered, and I run through it like a football player trying to get the winning touchdown to win the game. I broke through the doorway and kept on running. After what seemed like a minute or 2 running, I passed Mikey and forgot about my bike that was waiting there. I wasn't worried about my bike at all. I keep running and finally Mikey rides up on his bike and yells to me to stop. I finally start to slow down and he coasts on the bike. "Dude," Mikey says with very little breath, "wait here and I'll get your bike." He lays the bike to the ground with ease and starts running to the school. I yell at him to come back, but he ignores me. A few seconds later, he emerges with my bike. This kid isn't scared of nothing, I think to myself. He rides up a few seconds later and jumps off. Here, dude, he says, kind of exasperated and probably scared too. Thanks, man, I say in a hushed tone because I'm still on edge. Mikey hands me the handlebar to my bike and I take it and mount it like a cowboy in a western. He picks his ride up and says, let's ride. I stood there for a beat and could hardly move. He said louder, let's ride, boy. He mounts his bike and pedals to me. He puts his hand on my head and looks me in the eye. Come on, man, let's freaking go. I shake myself from my paralyzation and start pedaling my bike. We can hear voices coming our way. After a few pumps of adrenaline, we rolled down the street and down to the quick carry. We stopped behind the store. Dude, you okay? Mike asked. Yeah, man, I'm good. What did we just see? A lot, Mikey said. But I can tell you, I won't be doing that again. Not anytime soon. Man, me either, I say with a sigh. We climb off our bikes and we sit on the gravel. We talked for a few moments, and then we decided that we would go our separate ways and converse in the morning. So we split. I made it back home and no one was the wiser of my night out. I don't know what that was all about tonight, but I am not doing that unprepared again.
All right, you cats and kittens, I'm signing off and heading down the road to tell my wife to wake up and go back to sleep. So see you crazy kids on the flip side.